You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. And the guests are getting seated and getting ready to join us. So we're going to begin from, should I say Israel, really? But the war by the US and Israel on Iran. It doesn't look like the way President Trump thought about it is how he's going to get it. That he was going to get it brief, precise, and it will be brief. It doesn't look like it's going to be brief. And now we are beginning to count the cost as the entire of the Middle East is beginning to suffer, this. As we understand, there are some preliminary figures as gathered by Al Jazeera. They have a tracker for the war. So far, 1,332 have been killed in Iran alone. 1,332 in Iran alone by close of yesterday. At least 11 have been killed in Israel, 6 U.S. soldiers, and 9 killed in the Gulf states. And as you just heard yesterday, in Lebanon, a UN installation was attacked and Ghanaian soldiers are in distress. Some have suffered and are injured and are being taken to hospital to be treated. My guest this morning, Felix Kwachio-Fosu, is Minister of State, Government Communications. Dr. Mahamatia Abdul-Kabiru is MP Walwali and Member Finance Committee of Parliament. Oliver Bakavomawo is Constitutional Rights and Policy Strategy Advisor for the Democracy Hub. Bright Simmons is Honorary Vice President, Imani Africa. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you very much for making time to join us on Newsfile.
Thank you very much.
Great. Hi, Oliver. All right. So, hi, Oliver. Okay, so let's get you to get your gadgets properly, ready for us, because Oliver can't seem to hear me. Can you hear me, Oliver?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Great. All right. So, I wanted to begin from you online, but you have had a bit of a turbulent week, right? Maybe briefly, I don't know. You've had a turbulent week. Some of us were excited that the suit on the, Ayawaso.
I will continue to pursue. We don't. Any lawyer who goes to court knows that a judge is entitled to have a different opinion of what the law is. The judge himself was very clear that it was a difficult decision for him to reach in terms of how he reached his decision. He appreciated the efforts in this regard. In any event, it's not something that we are giving up on. We are still pursuing the different avenues within the law itself. And also a potential election petition, because we want to push the conversation all the way to see how the courts react to the question of voter inducement and money in politics.
Bring those of us who didn't follow that keenly up to speed. What were you seeking from the courts? You are not a party to the Ayawaso elections. So what were you in the courts trying to do?
Correct. So what Democracy Hub took to court was that by the NDC's own reckoning and by the reports that they themselves found, that there was significant issues of voter bribery, voter inducement, and a monetary.
Did we lose Oliver? I think we just lost Oliver there. If you're just joining us, this is Newsfile. It is your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. Our guest, Dr. Mahamatia Kabiru. Abdul Kabiru is right here in the studio. Oliver Boka Vomowo is joining us via Zoom. We have Bright Simmons, and we also have Felix Kwachiofosu joining us. Yes, Oliver, you were trying to explain to those of us who may not have followed this suit, what exactly were you seeking, especially when somehow you are unaffected by the politics of the Ayawaso?
So what we were looking for was that, as to the integrity of our public elections in general, what is the scope of what can be taken into account, to be able to say that this is a validly democratic process. Now, if you remember, the EC by itself, the NDC by itself had found two things. One, they were convinced that there was voter inducement, there was a monetized process, and that there were attempts at bribery in the process. Their conclusion is that they would have preferred for the entire process to be set aside. But they felt themselves constrained by two reasons. One, that this is an EC supervised election, and so they were unsure whether or not they could do that. And two, that the time frame within which they were supposed to present the candidate was too short, and so they decided to present Mr. Baba Jamal anyway. So our case to the court was whether or not, one, the NDC as a public body was bound by the rules that concern, the conduct of public officials in question of voter buying and inducement. And if that was the case, then the primaries that produced Mr. Baba Jamal would have then violated, our laws and the Constitution. And so this is the case we took to the Supreme Court, and also to the High Court. And also the fact that the EC's own involvement in the process, whether or not they were duty-bound regarding their ability to supervise the registration of political parties to ensure that they conform to democratic principles, that to overlook it and to present a candidate for public election, whether or not that was constitutionally sound, legally sound. So we took this to the High Court, and we asked for a number of reliefs, a number of declarative reliefs. And we said that consequentially, if the court was convinced in these reliefs, the declarative reliefs, it must then quash the decision of the EC to present the candidate for the main election, and also compel it then to organize fresh elections. Now, the court then took the view that because the relief we're asking to quash the EC's decision to advance the candidate was a judicial review remedy, it means that we shouldn't come by writ action. And it couldn't exercise or it couldn't remove those reliefs because, in his view, if it removed those reliefs, we would not then have standing to be able to present the action. Now, we disagree. We find that there are so many instances of public interest action that have been brought by writ. And we disagree with the court that the writ is a private law remedy, as the court took it and decided on that case. So that's something we're going to test in the Supreme Court more generally. But like I said, we're also considering an election petition under Article 99 of the Constitution, because this is a point that we want to push across far enough.
An election petition, well, this wasn't supposed to be a topic to discuss, but I'm interested. An election petition by who? The Democracy Hub? Because election petition must come by the parties who are affected.
So that's a very good point. The Constitution hasn't limited it that way, but Parliament has by the PNDC law. Well, the PNDC did, and now Parliament has adopted it. And we don't intend to challenge even the fact that, non-natural persons who are not in the constituency have been excluded from vetting the constitutionality of an election. But we are going to use one of the members of Democracy Hub who lives in the constituency and is entitled to vote to mount the election petition. So that's how we are going to go about it, but we are still very interested in it. It's an action backed by Democracy Hub. And
the petition is on the basis that the primary that produced Baba Jamal was illegal. There was a lot of fraud. Because there was vote buying widespread. That was like a poison fruit. It shouldn't have been presented to the people of Ayawaso East to eat.
Absolutely. So that's the argument we are making. And so now the courts have not expanded the question of whether or not the election of a candidate can be challenged on those grounds. And so it's again testing novel law to see whether or not our courts will be interested in the idea of how we vet our public elections. Yes.
Interesting. That was just by my way of saying good morning to you. But I mentioned two things. You're supposed to pay 5 million.
And there's everybody who's reaching out.
You have money
to contribute the 5 million fund. I have clearly a lot of money. Listen, We disagreed with the judge on this and some of the decisions that were made in connection with how the court reached its decision. In fact, the day the judge gave the judgment, we had pending motions before it. The court did not listen to them. And so we are going to challenge it in the normal process, But I think that it's also important that we contextualize this in what has become SLAPP legislation, SLAPP litigations, or strategic litigation against public participation. I am convinced about the veracity of the claims that are made. I'm able to speak to it, and I think that I'm entitled to be heard on those matters. But again, I have called on people, anybody who has 5 million to donate, please give it to Ghana Legal Aid to do that. I'm fine for now.
But you lost. That's the question. You lost the case.
Yes, at the High Court. At the High Court, we lost. We are entitled to, and we're going to appeal it. I've seen the same thing happen where Canadian Japan lost against Kuku Bakun, challenging it in the Court of Appeal. I stand by the veracity of the claims that were put out. There's no 100%. And so I'm going to challenge it. And let the court...
Yeah, but how did you lose it?
Well, so a number of things had procured. Before, when the matter started, I was being represented by Mr. Justice Sai, who's now Deputy Attorney General. And then when there was a switchover with a new counsel that came in, at the time, we had asked for time to be able to transcribe some audio recordings and present them as part of my witness statement. We had filed a defense before the court. My lawyer, when the new lawyer came in, prayed the court for time. The court refused, and so he continued cross-examination on the first day. I was not in the country, and I understand from the lawyer that he had missed court. And then when he went back to find out the court notes, the court had proceeded to strike out my defense. And so all the attempts we have been doing now is a motion to relist the defense and file the witness statement, which the court disagreed on. And so the court went ahead only on the basis, ended the case, the cross-examination of Mr. Kandapa was not done, ended the case at that point, and then gave judgment to the plaintiff, or Mr. Kandapa, on those bases, and decided generously to reduce their 10 million claim to a 5 million claim. So procedurally, that's how things transpired.
So this means in some sense that the case was determined determined, can I say one-sidedly? That your defense was not considered. Is that it?
Yes, completely. Not at all at any point. So the court has not pronounced on or weighted the merits of my case. This was exclusively based on Mr. Kandapa's case and nothing else, yes.
Because you have been faulted for having not done certain things, and your defense was struck off, and then you could not relist your defense so that you will be heard, as it were, the case will be determined on its merits.
Yes, absolutely. So the judgment, which we have still not received, was only exclusively based on Mr. Kandapa's case. In my case, the motion to relist, the judge refused to hear that motion and gave judgment.
Interesting. And so you are appealing this?
Yes, we are.
All right. Interesting there. It took us a while there on that introduction. But let me continue. And this is my way of seeking to do it before we talk about Israel, US, Israel, and Iran. Felix, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
It's been a while.
Yes, it's been a while.
Right.
I'm happy to be here.
So a while ago, I did Samson Stake.
Sure.
And when John Mahama, took over and decided that independence celebration will not come with the pomp and pageantry anymore, reduce cost and everything, some of us were very excited. I believe many Ghanaians are excited about that. Before that, we had been asking that African leaders should emulate the Magafuli and Samia, his predecessor, who dedicate the funds that would have gone into celebrations to projects, schools, roads, emergency health care. What's the response you are getting?
Well, I think the feedback has been great. What it is that when we first came to power, when the independence celebrations were inching closer, the president just called us one day and said that, is it really worth all this pomp and pageantry, given the cost? Beyond that also was the sheer stress that it puts on school children and military officers. Because we've had instances where some of the military officers and the school children have passed out during the sun because they had to stand on the sun for several hours. So in fact, you recall that even under the previous government, there was an arrangement where they came to the parade only when it was time to march. So that was a step taken to ensure that we minimize casualties. But then an issue of cost arose. So the president demanded to know the cost for the previous celebrations that took place before he took over power. We noticed that the MPP government moved it around. I think there was Tamale, there was Ho, there was Sunyani, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
The last one cost 15 million Ghana cedis. And when the president also asked for what it will cost to hold it at the Independence Square, because it's a bigger venue, and so you will need more numbers. Ordinarily, you need 60 contingents of 60 men and women each. So that right away gives you about 3,600 people marching on the day. So you have to take care of their transportation, their feeding, rations, and all the costs that come with it. So it came up to almost 20 million Ghana cedis. The president said he was not going to have any of it. So he then said, well, there's a way, we need to mark the date. This is a significant, perhaps the most important date on our national calendar. So what do we do to mark the day, preserve its importance and significance in our history, and yet minimize cost and all the problems associated with it? So he said, then we can use the forecourt of the presidency. Indeed, it's a vast, sprawling complex. It has a lot of space. So then we're going to cut it down to, I think, 300 people with some invited guests. It would unfortunately mean that we have to limit the number of people who can come in, because at the Independence Square or in regional capitals, people could come in their numbers and support the process. That one is a regrettable effect of having to cut down. But when everything was done and said, we cut down the budget by about 90%. So it came to 101.5 million or thereabouts last year. And same for this year. So that really was it. And I had the privilege of announcing it first last year, and it was very well received. It showed that people were interested in government cutting costs and making savings and what have you. Now, to the bit about...
By my calculation, the reduction was about actually 95%.
Yes, about 95%, yes. Yeah. Yes, it was a significant cut.
Right.
Now, you ask a question about, okay, so elsewhere, they put the money into tangible projects and all that. You see, but that would be valid if government was not spending on those things already. Indeed, between the 2025 and 2026 budgets, up to 50 billion Ghana cedis has been dedicated to roads alone.
All right.
If you come to AAK now, we are awash with roads. I can point to you 5 roads that are being constructed as I speak to you.
All right.
AAK alone. Okay. All over. There's money.
That's just my way of welcoming you briefly.
So that really is.
What have you been up to in Parliament, Dr. Kabir? What have you been up to after the cocoa, farmers' solidarity and everything else?
Yeah, so well, before I start, let me say good morning to the people of Wale Wale and to the good listeners of this particular program and viewers as well. Samson, the New Patriotic Party and the minority members of Parliament have taken the position that aligns well with the concerns of cocoa farmers. You realize that when government makes promises to the people and the promise is not honored, it will have to take the oversight hand of the executive. And the oversight in this case is the minority who will demand government live into the words and to the promise they made to the people of Ghana. Government, apart from failing to honor the promises they made to the cocoa farmers, they were visited with, in fact, an unfortunate haircut by way of over 1,000 Ghana cedi reduction in the price of the offer, the farm gate prices they offer for cocoa farmers per bag. And that, again, was another huge blow to the cocoa farmer. These, we were of the view, and I consider one that it was not helpful to the people and to the cocoa farmers, especially so when they were promised so much and they were given so much hope. But in the past week, we've been engaging the cocoa farmers, and we've visited a couple of them in several cocoa producing areas. We are continuing with the engagement, and what is clear from the cocoa farmers is that this is a broken promise. What is clear to them is that they were expecting the government to have lived their promises, but it's like they are falling short of those promises. So for us as a caucus, we are very much concerned. It's a matter that we've raised. It's a matter that we actually demonstrated to the president that we are standing in solidarity, shoulder to shoulder, with the cocoa farmers when the president visited us and in line with his constitutional mandate to address the country. That message was very clear. it is not a time for us to abandon it until certain government decides and then reviews the decision of cutting down the earnings of the cocoa farmers. I think the new Patriotic Party will continue to stand with the cocoa farmers. So this has been our activity. But then we hope the government would listen and the government would do something about the conditions of cocoa. Because mind you, most of them have children in school. They are not able to pay school fees. A lot of them, when you listen to them, when we visited them and you listen to their concerns, sometimes you feel like crying because the situation that they have been plunged into is quite unacceptable. We understand and we appreciate the government concern about world prices reduction, but we also argue that this is not the first time. That in the 2017, 2018, 17, 18, similar thing happened and government came in to intervene.
Thank you. Do we have Bright Simmons on?
I was hoping that you could give me an opportunity.
Hello, Bright.
Briefly before.
I will also respond to you.
It's important because a few things have been said regarding cocoa that are simply not true. You know, Dr. Atuforsen, in fact, he came to Abra Sebu Kwabankese as special guest for my campaign launch in 2024. It was on that platform that he made those comments about cocoa. First of all, we have not promised anything to the cocoa farmer that we have not delivered. When Dr. Atuforsen analyzed cocoa prices as of the time he was speaking, they were taking 12,000 Ghana cedis per bag and giving the cocoa farmer 3,000 cedis.
Yeah, did you explain that?
Which was less than 30% of the world market price. So we told them that if we were in government, we will not give anything below 70% of the world market price.
All right.
Since we've been in power, we've been giving them 70%, and then lately we've given them 90%. But something more importantly, Côte d'Ivoire, which is the largest producer of cocoa in the world, has slashed their price to 1,400 cedis per bag. Only 2 days ago.
Not true.
How is it not true?
No, it's
Something.
both statements. I didn't want this to go.
No, we won't have a debate
because
I was just introducing you.
It is beyond debate.
Hello, Bright.
They have done it.
Hello, Bright.
Anyway, we can go on.
Hello, Bright. Is Bright Simmons on?
Yes, Samson, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning.
Right. Briefly, the way I'm welcoming each one of you, what's the relevance of, our independence for someone like you, scholars who came together yesterday in the way we saw it and seeking to have a conversation to get Ghanaians in tune with what it means to really be Ghanaian and to promote brand Ghana?
Yeah, so yesterday the Ghana Studies Association had a commemorative webinar to mark Independence Day. Many of us went on a webinar to support them. And as you saw, some of Ghana's leading scholars, such as Professor Tukwesin, Professor Adoma Kwampofo, Professor Tracy Mensah, and Bob Millia, were all on that program. For my personal context, I've always been intrigued by the way that we've treated our national foundation myths as a country. So you go to every country in the world, they have a very clear national foundation myth, right? So let's say you take the United States, George Washington through Hamilton, Madison. These were all not people who loved each other in the independence era in the United States. There were a lot of contentions among them. They were very different people. Jefferson was very different from Madison, for instance. Certainly Hamilton was very different from George Washington. But what is important in the United States is that over the decades and the centuries, they've managed to converge around a clear national myth. I am always puzzled by the degree to which we are unwilling to accept a group of founding fathers, mothers, leaders that are representative of the entire political spectrum so that we can have a secure national myth. If you go to France, for instance, and you think of the Napoleonic era, surely there were a lot of problems in the Napoleonic era. If you are on the left, you don't appreciate the fact that he declared himself emperor and that he was very much reactionary in many of his thinking, in many of his thoughts. But nonetheless, Napoleon is a founding, pillar of the French Republic. That's because of the modernization of the legal code and other things that he did. So this tendency we have to litigate consistently with different factions of the political class, trying to impose their preferred ideological forebears on the whole country and demand that every other person who contributed to the shaping of this republic is either a traitor or a murderous dictator or something like that. It's just, as far as I'm concerned, completely unnecessary. We've reached a point where all of these people contributed in different ways to support the country, and we must accept that there will be a certain diversity among them and move forward towards what we can do as the later generation in building a new Ghana. So that is one of the things that I have reflected on.
Okay. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and the brains that were at play yesterday, even including the moderator, the depth of the knowledge that they had to share. And there was one thing they were talking about that really got me thinking, that we don't seem to have neighbors anymore. We are living, middle-class people living in our world homes, and, our kids don't know the kids in the next door. They don't have playtime, to, as it were, fraternize, and even accepting our brothers who are, as it were, not natural Ghanaians, so to speak, and all of these things. It was fascinating.
Yes, we are very grateful that Professor Mohamed Mensah Bonsu, who is the head of the law department at Shash University, agreed to moderate this. I'm sure at the very least, he relieved some of you from your constant moderation duties.
All right, now let's get to Iran, shall we? And sometimes I say Iran, and I don't know if exactly I should say Iran, because it's parallel beyond Iran, because of the way they are looking to take all of this on. Begin with you, Bright. Trump really thought that this was going to be very brief. It doesn't look like it's going to be brief.
Well, you're right. The nature of the war is very intriguing, because if you realize, we've had similar wars in the Gulf in the last 30 years. The Iran-Iraq war, for instance, then the two Gulf wars, the Yemen war, etc. What is different is the fact that at this point we are operating at a technological frontier. The two sides are extremely technologically equipped. And that makes it very different from what the case was in, say, the first Gulf War, the second Gulf War, the Yemen war, because both sides are extremely equipped with the latest technologies. We know, for instance, that Iran has begun to receive intelligence from the likes of Russia, helping them with effective targeting. So even though there's been some degradation, well, not some significant degradation of their missile capabilities, their targeting ratio may actually be increasing, as in the success rate of hitting valuable economic targets. We didn't have jamming to the extent that we have today. I'm talking primarily about electronic jamming technologies that are now in widespread use. What therefore makes that different from other episodes of Gulf Wars is that the liability context has changed for airlines in particular. During the Iraq War, you did the earlier Iraq War, you did have some airspace closures in Iraq and parts of Kuwait itself, but we didn't have this situation where even as far afield as places like Saudi Arabia, you had aviation schedules being affected. So this has been hugely significant. The extent to which the logistical sensitivity has increased due to technologies being at their frontier, due to stronger interconnectivity globally, and that has created a very different context. And it's very clear that if the war does not end soon, some of the biggest casualties will be Gulf economies that were seemingly on the ascendancy, the likes of Qatar, the likes of Saudi Arabia, the likes of UAE in particular. So yes, that is a big problem. But even before then, the so-called proxies of resistance or the axis of resistance, the Houthis, Hezbollah, etc., had also meant that for the first time in a very long time, we had sub-state actors which had access to very advanced technologies, missiles and other technologies of that nature. That it meant you had non-state actions that could also threaten airlines, etc. So I think that has been the biggest difference. And the second one, of course, is the fact that the choke point, the Strait of Hormuz,
right,
is more threatened than it's been in previous episodes. Even during the Iran-Iraq war, that was not a major play, as well as the fact that the amount of fuel that traversed through that strait.
We'll get around that to talk about the potential impact on us, Ghana.
Okay.
But did you think that the U.S., Israel anticipated that Iran will extend this beyond their borders in retaliation?
Okay, so it's not an area that I study closely, as you know, but from just like you observing the trends, my understanding is that the U.S. had brought that this might happen is the intensity at which the U.S. went at suppressing Iran's disparate air defenses. They achieved that much quicker in the first Gulf War in 100 hours. And so this was even taking a bit longer, but that notwithstanding, I think that...
Let me come to Felix here, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has just issued a statement on the back of the statement that the Ghana Armed Forces had issued yesterday, and it is headed, Government of Ghana formally lodges protest to UN Secretary General following condemnable attack on Ghanaian UNIFIL soldiers and demands full, immediate, impartial, and transparent investigations. This is a statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I'll just read just a portion of it to you. It says that the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Samuel Okudzeto-Ablakwa, has, on behalf of the government of Ghana, formally lodged a protest with the United Nations following the attack on the Ghanaian battalion serving with the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, in southern Lebanon, on 6th of March, which left 2 Ghanaian soldiers seriously injured. In the March 6, 2026 protest addressed to the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, the government of Ghana has called for a full, immediate, impartial, and transparent investigation into the circumstances surrounding the attack on personnel deployed in the service of international peace and security. Ghana strongly condemns this attack and has further demanded that those responsible be identified and held accountable, as the attack constitutes a grave violation of international law, amounts to war crime, and affronts the protection afforded to United Nations peacekeeping personnel. The government of Ghana has further urged the United Nations to take all necessary measures, as well as all personnel serving under the mission who, at great personal risk, make daily sacrifices in the service of humanity. The government of Ghana assures our gallant soldiers that no effort shall be spared in pursuing justice and guaranteeing enhanced protection. Our thoughts and prayers are with the injured and their loved ones. It has a few other paragraphs.
Like I'm saying, I mean, it shows you how seriously we are taking this matter. It's not one we will take lying down. It is a condemnable action, totally unacceptable. It violates all norms of reason and international law. No country is allowed to behave with such impunity and set about attacking non-combatants, people who have not shown any aggression, who are in fact there to keep the peace. And they've done this for decades. And it is very well known. It is an internationally recognized activity that they are engaging in. The activities do not pose any threats whatsoever to anybody within the region to warrant such an attack. And therefore, as the country whose troops have been at the receiving end of this attack, we need to take it very seriously. And that's why we've lodged this formal complaint. We expect that the United Nations will take it seriously and carry out thorough investigations to ascertain the causes of this and demand consequential action from whoever is responsible for this sort of attack.
Iran promised to retaliate in a way that hits the U.S. at the heart.
Yeah, but again, in what way are the Ghanaian troops supporting the U.S. action or the Israeli action? So really, that any argument of the sort,
they hit a UN installation to get attention.
Well, again, these are not verified reports.
Israel.
These are not verified reports. That is why an investigation is necessary. First of all, to determine who has actually carried out this attack and what sanctions should be applied to the person. But I think that for some time now, we have known that the rules-based international order has essentially collapsed. Those who have the might do as they please without recourse to its impact on the international community, the global community. Those who do not have the power or means to mount such a challenge are left helpless in the ensuing melee. One can only hope that reason will prevail, order will prevail. I do not see how any side wins or emerges victorious from this conflict. It will only lead to escalation of the crisis. Whatever it is, I think that dialogue is the way to go, especially when in the period preceding this conflict, there were credible reports of mediation going on, especially surrounding the subject of nuclear, some work being done on the acquisition of a nuclear weapon by Iran. The talks were said to be going well. So it is surprising that...
In fact, in this case with Lebanon, it is rather Israel.
Exactly, it is Israel but again, we need to conduct investigations to be absolutely certain about the source of this attack and know what needs to be done to hold Israel accountable, if indeed they are the ones behind this sort of thing. But I was making the point that the war itself is regrettable, especially because in the immediate period preceding it, there were credible reports of some gains being made in negotiations to ensure that nuclear proliferation was brought under control. That really is the essence of this battle. It is said to be a preemptive strike aimed at stopping Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons, which then begs the question as to why some countries think that they should have nuclear weapons, but others should not. I have never understood it, will never understand it. But again, as I said, those who are mighty tend to hold sway, do as they please, and say that others who do not have similar might should not do A, B, C. Right. But we hope that this conflict is wrapped up quickly so that normalcy returns.
Yes, well, we'll bring Ghana in the center, particularly when it comes to our, oil. Oliver, so I don't know. When you look at the way it is going now, there is some suggestion that Iran should immediately, sort of surrender and seek to negotiate. Do you see that happening?
First of all, I mean, I'll be shy to go into military strategy of Iran and in terms of how to proceed. What I do know is the recent comment, I think just yesterday, by the president of Iran, saying that an unconditional surrender is not going to happen, and that they're taking this to their graves. And I believe the Iranian resolve in that regard. But then again, international relations are funny. There can be the posturing, which is different from some of the things that is back-channeled in this regard. But a lot will be known if in fact, everybody was certain about the military objectives of the U.S. and Israeli intervention in Iran, whether or not this is very focused on regime change. There had been some suggestion that they wanted to do what had happened in Venezuela, take care of some hardliners and preserve some of the people that they want to work with.
But Trump has been very clear that this is the purpose, regime change.
Yes, and regime change can happen in so many ways. I mean, either or not you are removing some of the people who are already there now and replacing them with people within the inner circle who are deemed to be moderates with whom you can work with or who can advance your interest, or that you want to bomb them out of place. And everybody is clear that there's not been any example where only air bombings have been able to secure regime change without boots on the ground. As to whether or not you'll be able to get the American public to support boots on the ground, we don't know yet. But I need to be clear on this. I mean, I think that, and I've spoken consistently about this and our own responsibility as a country to speak about these kinds of actions. Countries like ours do not have the military might to be able to intervene and to be able to deal with these kinds of threats on a global scale. Which is why it is important when Felix says that the global rules-based order has collapsed, that we consistently speak up for And when it has been breached, we are clear in our moral voice as to why this is unacceptable. Because the only thing that protects us, and is the only thing we can have recourse to, when states seemingly feel like they are not bound either by the UN Charter, either by consistent international law, whether in terms of the use of force or whether in terms of humanitarian law that exists in this regard. It is more protective of countries like us to always make sure that we're always on the side of the rules, because the rules protect the weak and not the strong.
I guess one point to bear in mind, Samson, is that while this action is utterly condemnable, and I agree with everything that has been said by all the preceding speakers, Felix and Oliver, we also have to ask ourselves fundamental questions about the credibility and viability of this particular UNIFIL contingent. If you recall, this was an interim mission following the Israeli invasion of South Lebanon, where there was genuine belief internationally that it could, impose a neutral buffer, basically have UN soldiers stand between Israel and Lebanon, and that will somehow minimize hostilities. That has not happened because one of the key, well, actually, I would say two of the key commitments, which was to limit further Israeli incursions, and then secondly, the disarming of Hezbollah, have not happened. So because we have not been able to achieve that as an international community, what exactly are UN forces still doing there as auxiliaries of the Lebanese army, which is their original mandate? Resolution 1701 was very clear. Both sides had to commit to no incursions and the disarming of Hezbollah. None of those two are possible. Nobody's going to be able to stop the Israeli incursions in this current political economy, international political economy, except the United States, and it doesn't really believe very much in this whole mission, has been complaining about its costs, etc. And then no one is going to be able to disarm Hezbollah except Iran, and even sometimes I wonder if Iran could disarm Hezbollah. And so what is exactly the UN mission doing there? And should Ghana continue to contribute? Actually, it's been one down. If you followed the news, this was supposed to be, mission was supposed to be there only up to 31st December, and they are in the winding down phase. So it's double unfortunate, but I hope that we can now expedite the disengagement from the theater, because it's no longer a credible international peacekeeping force.
Right. Doc, from where you sit, so sometimes this is the way I think about it, the immediate purposes for the war, I normally ask myself, it doesn't look possible that you go to a war and expect it to end within a certain time, because normally the war never ends. Generations continue to fight it.
Yeah, so Samson, you see, I agree perfectly that war or armed conflict has never been a solution to any dispute. And if you recall, even our Nobel Prize winners have always advocated, Nelson Mandela, they have always advocated that we need to have peaceful dialogue resolution of any conflict. And to any state that assumes that it has the military might and they can install order and they can ensure peace by the imposition or by the exertion of that particular might is totally going to get it wrong. And that people would prefer to die with their dignity. And that to the extent that you are encroaching on my sovereignty, on my very person, what makes me an Iranian, an Israelis, people will fight to death. And for any leader to even contemplate that, they will want to install a certain order in a different country, a system you are very clueless about, a system that you have no knowledge as to how they govern and organize their social structure, you are going to get it wrong. And that is the mistake the United States is committing. And sometimes, because we are trying to be politically correct, we fail to call these people out. As a matter of fact, Donald Trump is trying to be a bully. And that is the reality. That the American people conduct a survey even amongst the American people, they will not support what he's doing.
I don't know about that particular one, but being a bully, he started it from day one with these, unlawful tariffs that have now been struck down.
Exactly. So you cannot go on. And in fact, this current war, in the 12-day war with Iran, in the middle of negotiation, you went and bombed Iran. And you told the whole world that you had targeted an nuclear enrichment center, and you have destroyed, in fact, you have obliterated everything.
Obliterated
Everything. That was your words. Less than 6 months down the line, in June, you are now telling the whole world that Iran has nuclear weapons and that Iran is trying to develop nuclear. I mean, look at the double standard, look at the inconsistency. Secondly, you say you want to change regime. Who gives you the audacity to determine how the Iranian people should govern? I mean, I'm still trying to, difficult. Look,
America is a democracy police. You don't know that?
I like the fact that Oliver is coming from. Look, if the Americans should decide to come to Ghana and take away our president, we will be helpless. The only way we can forestall that or prevent that is to speak against the injustice that is happening to others. The moment it is happening to Venezuela, we are quiet because we are not Venezuelans. If it's happening to Iranians, we are quiet because we are not Iranians. The very day they come to Ghana, people will not be there to speak for us.
But Ghana has been swift these days. Ghana has not been quiet.
I agree that on these particular matters, we are trying to develop an international, in fact, we are developing an international or foreign policy of being from our non-aligned to more or less taking center stage, especially when there are matters bordering on human rights, bordering on the United Nations Charter, bordering on the rules governing the ICC. We are very vocal. But you see, this war with Iran has 3 axes. One, there's a propaganda bit of it. In both sides, you can see Iranian telling their story, you can see American telling their story, you can see the Israelis telling their story. People are even thinking that this is a religious war. As a matter of fact, in Israel, only about 2% of the population are Christians. So for any Christian or for any person to even sit down and think that this is a religious war is actually being very dogmatic and being brainwashed. Because Jews constitute about 75% population of the population of Israel. In fact, there are more Muslims in Israel than there are Christians. Right? So we take away the religion and you realize that these are people fighting over certain economic, certain territorial, certain kind of sovereignty that they want to flex their muscles. We need to get it from that. There's also the technological bit that, very much highlighted by
It's basically a
technology. And you see, the American thought that this was going to be like another 12 days war or another maybe 1 week. They go and change, they kill the leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, and then that is all. But these people have succession that even if you kill the 10th person, there's someone who is going to take over. Clear line of succession. So your method did not work in 1951. It did not work in 1979. It cannot work in 2006. So I think that the American and the international community will have to look at this whole issue about...
So let's come home quickly. What are you seeing? What are we likely to suffer as a result of this?
Well, so first and foremost, Ghana is going to be affected in our trade because if you have any businesses that is going on within the Gulf area and traders are going there, we are doing businesses, even now as close as Dubai, movement, airports were locked down.
Yeah, our players have not been able
to leave. This is one of the effects that we are going to affect, immediate effect. Another effect that we cannot run from, and like the market is already starting to respond, that from as low as $65 to the barrel in oil prices, we have gone to 92, thereabout. And analysts are saying that it is the matter of when, but not if, prices are going to go to $100 to the barrel if this war should continue. Invariably, it's going to...
We have reserves for between 5 and 7 weeks, is it? For
that statement of having reserves, you see, why is it that whenever prices in the world market change, there is adjustment in prices domestic? Do we say we have reserves, so we have to wait? That doesn't work. We are only creating the sense that those reserves are there. If we are locked out of the international community by way of importation, we may be able to, live within. But that doesn't mean that prices will not change, because the buyer will be thinking that if I don't increase prices, I will not be able to place the next consignment. So the effect, the knock-on effect in terms of prices is going to be there. We can't run away from that.
Right.
Again, the other effect that we are likely to see is the possible radicalization and elements now coming within our borders. For instance, where is going to be the safe haven for those people who are affected? Which countries are they going to move to? If Hezbollah is not finding, if you like Lebanon,
to
safe.
our borders?
Any country. As a matter of fact, any country. And you see, the potential for Ghanaians to be recruited. In fact, it's happening in Ukraine. Ghanaians are fighting in the war in Russia-Ukraine. Is it not a national security threat to us that our own compatriots are joining Ukrainian forces and Russian forces fighting each other? The same thing is going to happen if you have this relationship or these hostilities continuing. Would have Ghanaians having to join either Israel or Iran in this particular fight. And this is going to be driven by economics, because they will know that these people will pay more. Instead of being unemployed in this country, why don't I take the gun and join so that I can make some living?
Right. Oliver, do you also see potentially that the economic gains that we are celebrating risk being derailed?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that, okay, let me start from here. It's clear that our trading relations with, say, Iran directly or Israel are not perhaps at the highest compared to some of our other trading partners. But the bigger thing that the government has been celebrating over the past few months has been record gold sales, right? Artisanal small-scale mining contributes now about 52% of all gold produced in Ghana. Much of it, about 80%, is refined in Dubai. Now with what is going within the region, it means that our ability to go through the Dubai route is going to be impacted unless we find other routes, maybe India, and to be able to absorb some of it. Now, if we have received in excess of 10 billion, as the Bank of Ghana was telling us from gold, then our ability to bring in that critical cash is going to be a problem within the past few the going months. It doesn't mean that the price of gold would plummet. I don't foresee that. I think more likely than not, the prices are going to go high. Our ability to send them out is where the problem is going to be. And if we can resolve that, then we'll be in a better position. The question of oil and its impact, and this is my hope.
Because the UEA, which is our biggest place for our gold, they are affected.
Absolutely. It's also in the middle of this. And it's clear that in terms of regime survival, the Iranians are not going to stop hitting some of the regional countries, the UAE in particular. And so that is going to be a problem in a minute. Now, in terms of oil, this is my hope that we're going to start thinking of critical measures. That the conversation that was said somewhat towards the end of last year that the Maui refinery was able to refine oil, whether or not it can take our oil, the oil produced in our oil fields, whether or not we can put in critical emergency measures to be able to deal with domestic consumption so that we don't have a price spiral again. I think that's some of the things perhaps the economic advisors will be advising government on. But I think generally there are perhaps ways in which we can mitigate this. Everybody is hoping that the conflict ends early. And if it does, we can all breathe a sigh of relief in the coming weeks.
All right. And Bright, from where you sit, is there something we should be doing to avoid the natural implications on our economy?
I think the analysis by Oliver is exactly the one I will have made. One, our direct relations with Iran on an economic front has basically collapsed. I think we peaked in 2010, and we are now basically doing thousands of dollars in trade, not even millions of dollars in trade. So we don't have direct economic relations. We have a lot of indirect channels of contagion. One of those indirect channels of contagion is one that we've warned about in the past, and that is the excessive concentration of Ghana's, the gold board's global value chains in the UAE and India. Presently, the strategy is that there is a lot of transshipment through the UAE that goes into India because there is a UAE-India arrangement that favors that kind of transshipment. Now, with problems with Emirates, we're going to have great difficulty, and a lot of that has been through the Emirates channel. Even direct diversion to India might therefore mean that the concentration on that trade route affects our bargaining power. So that's something that we need to have thought about much earlier, because we have been raising this issue of over-concentration. Nobody bothered to look at the data. So that is a bit worrying. The second point is that, yes, when you have a situation like this, people very carefully calculate the overall impact on the United States. if there's a view that the cost of this war is about $1 billion a year, other factors that might affect, debasement of U.S. currency, etc., then there's a tendency to bet against the dollar, and that leads to a flight to gold, because gold is a safety haven. Now, if that were to happen, gold price will increase, and that will be beneficial to Ghana overall. The problem, of course, the dollar will also lose value, which will be beneficial to Ghana, because we have a tendency, we have an interest now in increasing the value of our currency. But our currency is already nearly overvalued. I've been, very convinced in my mind that the currency is overvalued. So further overvaluing of the currency has a huge impact. We've seen that with cocoa farmers, which is exactly what happened in the 70s when we had an overvalued currency for many years. We hit cocoa farmers very hard, and there was significant migration of cocoa farmers into other productive activities. And some of that is going to also continue happening if we continue to overvalue the currency. So that's something to keep an eye on.
Right.
In terms of the oil issue, it's a very straightforward issue. We are currently subsidizing cocoa by maybe $700 million thereabouts, because the policy of this country does not allow the NPP, given its own conduct, the NDC, given its own conduct in opposition. Because, when the government spokesperson, Felix, talked about the fact that the NDC was giving only 30% of international price to farmers, he was not acknowledging the fact that there were huge problems with forward sales, etc. Yeah. And therefore, that was not really 30% effectively, because the government was not getting $12,000 a ton. So that kind of political conversation has meant that the government is now having to subsidize cocoa farmers and still take a political hit. Now, those subsidies, if they were to be extended to petroleum, we also have subsidies of electricity. We are subsidizing electricity by maybe $500 million a year. If we were to add that to petroleum, our subsidy bill will hit about $1 billion. This year, that will not be a big problem, because our economic indicators are all pointing in the positive direction. Next year, as our debt servicing increases, as some of the debt relief benefits, start to deplete, and as our spending ramps up, the subsidy bill will become a huge problem for our fiscal management, and we have to start keeping an eye on these different subsidy regimes that are all over the place, that very few are tracking. So that's a huge indirect channel for us to pay attention to.
So in the Jubilee House, in government, what's going on in your minds? What's the conversation that is going on now? Because you are making some impacts as far as the economic front is concerned. So you begin to feel, oh God, don't let this happen, because it will derail the efforts we have made so far.
Well, it depends on the fundamentals that you have. You see, when the NPP had a difficulty with the economy, it was because the fundamentals were weak. They simply did not exist at the time. You see, when the Russia-Ukraine conflict struck in February, the economy had been on a massive decline, at least since 2001. Around that time, the cedi was tanking. Indeed, it moved from 6 cedis. In fact, by 2021, the cedi was around 5 cedis to $1. By 2022, it moved from 6 cedis to 17 cedis. When you have that, it is going to impact your economy in ways that are more profound than when it is stable. So, for instance, if you bought oil at $100 a barrel, and your cedi is trading at 17 Ghana cedis to the dollar, a barrel immediately costs 2,700 cedis. However, if, as the cedi is now around 10.6, if you buy the same $100 per barrel of oil, your bill is around 1,000 cedis or 1,100 cedis. So its impact in terms of transmission to the consumer is lower. That is why it is important to have strong economic fundamentals. Something since 2015, we've had a deregulated oil market, at least in the downstream. What that simply means is that it is the factors of production that account for pricing. There are 3 of these. There's a world market price of oil. These days, we're bringing refined products. That one nobody controls. But we certainly control the other 2, taxation and then the exchange rate. In the case of the NPP, they failed on all these 3. In fact, when they came to power, they increased the SLAPP and imposed a number of taxes on fuel and increased some other handles. And then the cedi was completely destroyed. That immediately increased the cost of fuel at the pump. So as I've indicated to you, even if the world market price rises and the cedi remains stable and rallies strongly as it is doing now, the impact will be more limited than it was under the MPP. The other issue that I want to raise is that I personally do not foresee this war extending into a protracted conflict for many reasons. If the US allies, UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and co. continue to take the hits, it is going to pile up pressure on them to amend their stance. Domestically, there is some opposition. It has electoral consequences. You know how war can be a contentious issue in the US. That also will be brought to bear. If the US economy itself begins to take a hit, they are going to have to amend their ways. I do not foresee that this conflict will be prolonged. Of course, war in itself creates difficulties, especially in the immediate vicinity where it is happening.
Right.
So there have been disruptions to global trade, there have been disruptions to global travel. I don't foresee that going on beyond an extended period of time. Now, gold, I don't think there's any shortage of markets for gold. It may be true that the UAE and India are primary, markets. I don't think that there's a shortage globally for where we can sell the gold. If gold prices surge as a result of this conflict, it will inure to our benefit because gold has proven to be a valuable metal. What happens is that because
we're told gold prices will continue to
because of its value
in the next 3 years.
Because of its value, anytime you want to sell, you get an instant market. That is the beauty about having gold. And we've put in place an arrangement that ensures a sustainable supply of gold that we can use to mitigate the problem. Somebody raised the issue about Thor. Something, even if we sell our oil to Thor, we still have to sell it at the market rate. We cannot subsidize the oil we produce here just for purpose of domestic production. What happens is that if you refine crude oil locally, you cut out freight, which would come in if you import, and then margins that those who produce it outside place on it when you go to buy it.
Right.
So it is certainly going to be cheaper, but it is not as simple and straightforward as people make it sound. When you produce crude oil in Ghana and you give it to Thor, you have to sell it at the prevailing world market price. This is the other contributing factors to price that is lowered. So that one must be placed on. It's not as though you can just take your oil and give it to Thor cheaper than they would get it. In fact, it is possible to get imported crude oil cheaper. And mind you, ours is also light crude. It is sweet light crude, so it has a premium. So it is on the world market. It is more expensive than other brands of crude oil.
So you seem to bank your faith on the fact that we have great reserves. Our fundamentals are looking good. But the question I put to Bright, is there something you are doing deliberate because of what is happening?
Oh, of course. And the energy minister has been busy meeting with players to see how this can. It is the duty of government to take steps in times of crisis to prove citizens against hardships. And that is why we foresaw this and decided that the fundamentals need to be brought under control. And I wish to stress again that it was not only the world market price of crude oil that created the problem for the MPP government in 2022. Long before that, the economy had been declining. So that amplified the effects of what had happened in Russia and Ukraine. That is not the situation now.
Okay.
In terms of reserves, what happens simply is that it gives you a certain buffer if push comes to shove and you are not having imports. But it is something that you can use to mitigate the effects. Even if there's an increase, it is unlikely to get to the levels. Because at some point, they were selling diesel for 23 cedis. That was when the cedi went to 17 cedis. If you do the multiplication, it is clear and straightforward that you are not going to have that effect if the fundamentals are stronger now than they were under the MPP. It is a regrettable situation.
Okay, so
but you have to be prepared.
Yes, Bright, I heard you trying to make an intervention.
I just wanted to make a quick correction.
If you are in a country where the reserves that were projected, you were projected to meet by 2028, is it? You meet them in 2026 or 2025, then Felix is right to talk about the stability that we can expect.
Yes, but I just wanted to correct the impression that our gold is easily sold anywhere else, because you see, the small-scale gold is not traceable. So it does not qualify for London Bullion Market Association delivery, what we call good delivery. So that means that any market where there is a strict requirement to have traceable gold cannot take our gold.
Okay.
The reason why we are concentrated in India and the UAE is because we're not done with our traceability dynamics within the small-scale sector. So the notion that we are producing this very large amount of gold, we can sell them anywhere, is not correct. Secondly, because we also decided to tie the gold to support for our currency, we needed the liquidity. So the idea that we could strategically stockpile gold for many months or whatever, and then release them at the right point doesn't work in the current domestic gold purchase program arrangement, where there's a need for a lot of liquidity to supply the market with dollars.
Thank you.
Else the price of the CD will start to fall again.
Thank you.
So that was a correction that was very important to make.
Right. I take a break on this message from one of our viewers, Mr. Dubois. He says that there is a new doctrine in town, the Donroe Doctrine. We will have to bear it for the next 3 years. This is a well-calculated war. Israel has been wanting this for a long time, but no support from their bosses, the USA. So they see it as now or never. Remember the Iranian regime and Shiite. So most Arab countries, Sunni, support this action. Iran will be bombed to its knees and will obviously negotiate for a settlement with probably a bit moderate leader in power and opening up the country for business. President Trump is very much aware of midterm elections and oil prices. Felix was talking about this. So it's obvious the war will end soon. There is simply too much at stake and a lot of back dealing going on. Countries like ours should just keep quiet and watch the situation quietly. Really.
As for keeping quiet, I'm not sure that it is I'm not sure it's a tenable proposition.
Yeah, but before break, there are some, reference to our MPP region. And I think that when you ask a very simple question, what is the government doing? Answer it as simple as possible. But if you go to talk about what happened, and then you are not being, true to the facts, it's important to correct it. For instance, it's true that before Russia, Ukraine war, there were problems. But he has failed to acknowledge that even before that, the economy was grounded to its knees with almost zero growth due to COVID. You didn't put that into the picture. So when you are doing this analysis and you are being very convenient, and he again says that there's not going to be effect because there's stability, he fails. And maybe he's failing to analyze the fact that once oil prices are increasing, your demand for forex is going to increase and it's going to depreciate your currency. So they are mutually self-reinforcing. It is not okay to just think that...
He's talking about better fundamentals.
I'm saying that if you have the CD being traded to the dollar at 10 Ghana cedi, because of this fuel price increase, it can depreciate to something like 11 or 12.
Point well noted.
So those are the points you need to put in the equation.
We take a break here. When we return, as you know, we are returning to the bond market. What are the dynamics? We'll be right back.